I want to take a little trip over to using outreach services. So one option to overcome digital exclusion is obviously to take advice services directly in person to those communities who suffer from digital exclusion. A number of you will have heard about the Norfolk Community Law Service Justice Bus, and if you haven't, Alice is going to post a link to the news article. It was also an idea that was considered to kind of tackle the challenges of delivering advice rurally in Northern Ireland. And I'd really like to bring in Fiona Magee to talk a little bit about the ideas that have been discussed to deliver outreach services in the Advice Northern Ireland network. Fiona, are you around? Excellent. Oh, just remember to unmute. Fantastic.
Thank you, Martha. Hello, everyone. This is my first time at this particular meeting, so I'm looking forward. I'm learning as we go, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. But just really to give you a little bit of insight into Advice NI first. Advice NI is a regional network organisation, and we have about 70 members across Northern Ireland that provide generalist, specialist and targeted advice services, some of which are also regional, some of which are operating at generalist level, and others obviously at that more complex case representation level. We deliver advice services ourselves in Advice NI through free phone helplines, which has come about in the main because of the way the government wanted to fund advice services, if you like, and where there wasn't capacity at that time. Obviously now that things are more remote, that presents a new challenge to members in Advice NI, but we deliver the helpline services on debt, welfare reform, tax and benefits, EUSS and immigration. And we had been resourced to deliver the COVID helpline, where we were receiving up to 2,000 calls per day. So it was quite a large number of calls coming through that we wouldn't have been used to. It was quite difficult to manage, but we managed it particularly well and caught most of the calls. But we had to be very flexible in our approach. And I suppose with the change to remote learning, we had just moved offices in August, so we were quite quick to respond to setting all of the team up remotely within Advice NI, and also to support our members to do so as well, and provided ongoing support and advice to them on government regulations around COVID restrictions, and also around the challenges of remote working and so on. But one of the things that we had that had been fed back to us from our members, and that we were aware of ourselves, was that there was a change in the profile of those that were coming to use the advice services, or that were contacting the advice services, and the vulnerable that would have been using it almost became more vulnerable. So we had those that were being furloughed, those that were facing redundancy and unemployment, people that wouldn't traditionally have used advice services in the past or have needed to use them, were beginning to use them. So with the support of funders and Access to Justice and others, we were able to engage an employment specialist within Advice NI. And we also identified that through our EUSS service, which members were involved in delivering, also the paperwork requirements, the requirements around paperwork and proof of identity and suitability and so on, in the main required face-to-face services, and also with some of those particular groups being particularly vulnerable with language barriers, digital lack of digital skills or access to digital equipment, there was a need to get out and reach those people. So we were fortunate enough to get some support from a funder to fund and resource. We call it a mobile, a bus, a van. We're not precious about the term, but it's an advice bus or an advice van, and we have it. It has the Advice NI brand on it, and the members can slot in their brand as well. So the bus is to be used by Advice NI and members depending on where the need is. So we have it designed in such a way that it can be branded as Advice NI, with members' brands also inserted there depending on which member is taking the bus out. So the bus is COVID friendly, it's COVID safe. There's space within it for 3 people, 3 separate people, if you like, the driver, the advisor and the client. And we have, I I've lost the term now. We have the reverse kind of IT equipment on either side, so a client can be working off the same screen as the advisor to input whatever data they need to input and to be able to know where to sign documents and so on. We have a booking system for the van, so members can take the van for a week at a time, a day at a time, whatever they want. We had to check out the insurance to ensure that not only we haven't a driver employed to drive the van, but the van can be driven by anyone who meets the insurance requirements, and that's pretty loose. We also have developed protocols and processes in relation to the van, so it has to be cleaned down immediately before and after use. There's a 15-minute gap in between clients accessing the bus. We also have protocols around washing the van, making sure there's fuel in the van and so on. And we've taken it out to, for example, a large employer where there were EU national and frontier workers, and we took the van out there and dealt with quite a number of people on a one-to-one basis, looking at their EU status and issues they were having around that, and also around frontier workers. We also have used it and are using it in local advice areas. So, for example, members have been in touch with their local health centres, and they'll be taking the van out to the health centre. We don't intend for people to be queuing up outside the van, but the people make appointments to have an advice session within the van, and we can go to people's houses with the van and they can come out, because we know that there's a lot of people that are still quite afraid to even come out with COVID, particularly older people. And those with disabilities and health issues. We just recently as well, we had this in our application for the funding, and it's quite a novel idea, I think, but we're trying to be creative and thinking about how do we reach those most in need. So we have just recently had a PA system built into the van so that it can go to communities where we're trying particularly hard at this time to target the EU nationals in Northern Ireland with the pressing deadline of the 30th of June. So we intend to go to local areas where we know there are groups of particular communities. So, for example, the Roma community, we know there's a lot of them in a particular area or particular areas within Northern Ireland. So the plan is we'll have a looped system with information in their language running on the loop system with the details of the phone number and how they can access the advice service and how we can be available with the van and so on. And we intend to do that for a number of different languages. So that will help us address the language barrier a little bit for those groups, and also with the technology being available on both sides, being mirrored on both sides of the COVID safe ends of the van, then we can talk them through what they need to do to complete, if they want to complete the forms themselves for EU applications. So sorry Fiona, if we could just bring it to a little bit of a close. That's all so interesting, but unfortunately we're really short of time. No problem.
Are there any kind of last remarks that you want to make?
Last remarks, just on some of the stuff that other people had said. One of our advisors had told us about a compassion fatigue training that they have for advisors, so it fits in with that whole thing about advisors and burnouts and having to cope with remote learning or remote working themselves. And we also have anytime learning training sessions that we put on for advisors, so they can go on anytime and do the training that they need online as well. But yeah, any questions or anything, contact us at AdviceNI. I'm Fiona at adviceni.net, and I'll put it on the chat. But really glad to be on today and to meet all of you and learn from you. But that's our novel idea for now. No doubt we'll come up with more. But yeah, it's going so far so good.
Fiona, thank you so much. I absolutely adore the idea. In my head, it's kind of like an ice cream van, but for advice with like a loud hailer. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. As I said, we could talk about these things a lot more in depth. And if that's something that this group wants to do, then we can explore the ways in which we can do that. Because I think, Fiona, we could sit and ask you questions all day about all your work. It sounds fantastic.